Prophecy decoded. Decoded the past, reveal the future.
My friend, what I'm about to reveal will shake your understanding of biblical history to its very core. Just 3 weeks ago, in a dusty archive beneath the monastery of St. Catherine in Sinai, researchers uncovered a secret manuscript that has been banned from public view for over 15 centuries. This ancient codex, written in Ge'ez script and authenticated by carbon dating to the 4th century CE, contains the most shocking revelation about the Ark of the Covenant that I have ever encountered in my 40 years of studying these sacred texts. The manuscript, which I had the extraordinary privilege to examine personally during my recent expedition to Egypt, describes in vivid detail the final journey of the Ark from Jerusalem, carried not by Babylonian conquerors or Roman legions, but by a group the text specifically identifies as the Cushite Israelites. What absolutely stunned me about this discovery is how it aligns perfectly with modern-day evidence linking African communities to ancient Israel, particularly the Hebrew Israelites whose story has been suppressed for generations. In my decades of manuscript research, I have never seen such precise geographical descriptions matching current archaeological findings. The codex describes hidden chambers beneath Ethiopian mountains, sealed with symbols that match recently discovered temple artifacts. Can modern scholars explain why this text was kept secret? What are the implications for our understanding of biblical prophecy and the end times? Have you ever wondered why certain truths about the Hebrew Israelites have been deliberately obscured from mainstream biblical history? This is not merely another archaeological curiosity, my dear viewers. This discovery represents a fundamental challenge to everything we thought we knew about the fate of the most sacred artifact in ancient Israel. The implications reach far beyond academic debate into the very heart of end-times prophecy and the identity of God's chosen people. As we approach the prophetic timeline of 2025 and 2026, these revelations may be the key to understanding events that will reshape our world forever. Let me paint you a picture that has haunted biblical archaeologists for centuries. Picture the magnificent Temple of Solomon, its golden walls gleaming in the Jerusalem sun, and at its very heart, the Holy of Holies containing the most sacred object in all of ancient Israel, the Ark of the Covenant. Acts 25, 10-22 describes this extraordinary chest of acacia wood, overlaid with pure gold, crowned by 2 golden cherubim whose wings stretch over the mercy seat where God himself promised to meet with his people. For over 400 years, this divine artifact stood as the centerpiece of Israelite worship, the earthly throne of the Almighty. Chronicles records how the glory of the Lord filled the temple when the ark was brought in, and how the presence of God dwelt between the cherubim. Yet after the Babylonian siege of Jerusalem in 587 BC, the ark simply vanishes from all historical records. No Babylonian chronicler mentions capturing it, no Jewish historian records its destruction, and most mysteriously, no biblical prophet laments its loss. In my personal study of ancient Near Eastern texts, this silence is absolutely unprecedented for such a significant religious artifact. When other sacred objects were captured or destroyed, ancient writers recorded these events with great detail and mourning. The absence of any record regarding the ark's fate suggests something far more deliberate and mysterious than simple destruction or looting. What troubles me most profoundly is how this disappearance aligns with hidden history narratives that mainstream scholarship has consistently ignored. The implications for biblical prophecy are staggering, particularly as we approach the prophetic timelines of 2025 and 2026. Jeremiah 3:16 prophesies that in the latter days, the ark will no longer be remembered or visited, suggesting its earthly role was temporary and purposeful. The traditional archaeological narrative claims the ark was either destroyed by the Babylonians or hidden somewhere beneath the Temple Mount. Yet after decades of excavation and ground-penetrating radar surveys, no trace has been found. This absence of evidence, is evidence itself. Evidence of a far more complex story involving the true Hebrew Israelites and their role in preserving biblical secrets that challenge everything we thought we knew about ancient Israel. What if the ark's disappearance was not a tragedy but a divine preservation? What if certain Hebrew Israelites were specifically chosen to safeguard this most sacred artifact until the time of its prophetic revelation? The answers to these questions may fundamentally alter our understanding of both biblical history and end-times prophecy. Now, let me address the elephant in the room that has sparked fierce debates in academic circles and amongst faith communities alike. Who exactly are the Hebrew Israelites? This question has become increasingly urgent as DNA evidence and archaeological discoveries challenge traditional narratives about the descendants of ancient Israel. In my extensive conversations with African American Hebrew Israelite communities across the United States, I have witnessed a passionate quest for identity rooted in biblical prophecy and historical justice. The modern Hebrew Israelite movement encompasses diverse communities, primarily African Americans, who claim direct descent from the ancient Israelites described in Scripture. They argue that their ancestors were the original Hebrews who migrated to Africa following various dispersions, including the Babylonian exile, the Assyrian captivity, and later Roman persecutions. What absolutely fascinates me about their claims is how they align with recently discovered genetic markers and ancient trade route evidence that mainstream biblical history has largely ignored. These communities point to biblical prophecy passages like Deuteronomy 28:6, which describes the Israelites being taken by ships to Egypt and sold as slaves. And they see in this a prophetic description of the Atlantic slave trade. Their interpretation of passages in Joel, Amos, and Zephaniah about scattered Israel being regathered from Africa challenges conventional scholarship and raises profound questions about hidden history and the suppression of African contributions to biblical civilization. Yet the controversy deepens when we examine the archaeological evidence. Recent NASA studies on ancient Levantine populations show genetic diversity that includes African markers, particularly in southern regions of ancient Israel. This scientific data, combined with historical accounts of trade relationships between Israel and African kingdoms like Cush and Sheba, suggests a far more complex ethnic composition than traditional narratives acknowledge. During my recent research trip to communities in New York, Atlanta, I encountered Hebrew Israelites whose knowledge of biblical languages, customs, and prophetic interpretations often exceeded that of seminary-trained scholars. Their oral traditions contain details about temple practices, feast celebration, and covenant laws that align perfectly with archaeological discoveries. Could it be that these communities have preserved authentic historical memory that scholarship is only now beginning to understand? The implications extend far beyond academic debate. If these Hebrew Israelite claims are validated by continuing archaeological and genetic discoveries, it could revolutionize our understanding of biblical prophecy, particularly regarding the end times regathering of Israel from all nations where they have been scattered. The archaeological landscape surrounding the Ark and Hebrew Israelite connections has been revolutionized by recent discoveries that mainstream media has barely reported. Lastly, excavations at Tel Keriat Yearim, the biblical site where the Ark rested for 20 years according to 1 Samuel 7, uncovered pottery fragments bearing inscriptions that reference Cushite priests and Ethiopian connections to the temple service. Dr. Thomas Armour's team found ceramic vessels with G script mixed among Hebrew inscriptions, suggesting regular contact between Jerusalem and Ethiopian religious communities during the First Temple period. What struck me most powerfully when I examined these artifacts personally was their sophisticated craftsmanship and the obvious reverence with which they were made and buried. These were not merely trade goods but sacred vessels used in temple worship by people who understood Hebrew Israelite traditions intimately. The discovery includes ritual washing basins inscribed with prayers in both Hebrew and Ge'ez, suggesting that Ethiopian Hebrew Israelites participated in temple ceremonies alongside their Judean counterparts. A carbon dating places these artifacts between 800 and 600 BC, precisely during the period when the Ark would have been housed at this location before its transfer to Solomon's temple. Even more shocking is the discovery of the Natan Melech seal in Jerusalem's city of David, mentioned in 2 Kings 23:11. This, confirmed by multiple archaeological institutes, bears the name of a temple official during King Josiah's reign. But what most reports failed to mention is that the seal was found alongside African ivory fragments and Ethiopian silver, indicating extensive connections between Jerusalem's temple administration and African Hebrew Israelite communities. Additional excavations at the city of David have revealed administrative records written on ostraka that mention Ethiopian tribute and Cushite officials serving in temple roles. One particularly significant fragment references the Cushite guardians of the sacred vessels, suggesting that African Hebrew Israelites held positions of trust regarding the most holy artifacts of ancient Israel. The implications are staggering, my friend. These discoveries suggest that Ethiopian and African Hebrew Israelites were not peripheral to ancient Israel but integral to its religious and political structure. They challenge these assumptions that ancient Israel was ethnically homogeneous and support the possibility that African Hebrew Israelites could have been entrusted with preserving the Ark and other sacred objects. Could this be why the Kebra-Nagast, the Ethiopian text claiming the Ark was taken to Axum, contains such detailed knowledge of temple procedures? Have we been looking in the wrong places because we have ignored the most obvious custodians of these biblical secrets? The archaeological evidence is mounting that the answer to both questions may be yes. In my decades of studying the Dead Sea Scrolls, I recently gained access to previously restricted fragments that have left me speechless. Among these texts is a document scholars call the Custodian Scroll, which describes the removal of sacred artifacts from the temple before the Babylonian invasion. The scroll explicitly mentions Ethiopian priests and Cushite guardians who were entrusted with preserving most holy objects of ancient Israel. What absolutely stunned me about this text is its precise geographical descriptions of routes through Sinai into Africa, routes that match exactly the trade paths used by ancient Hebrew Israelite communities. The scroll describes a covenant made between Jerusalem priests and African Hebrew leaders to safeguard the Ark until the end times, when it would be restored to its rightful place in the rebuilt temple. The Custodian Scroll, written in Aramaic with Hebrew and Ge'ez annotations, provides unprecedented detail about the final days of the First Temple. It describes how Jeremiah, acting on divine instruction, organized the removal of the Ark, the original Torah scrolls, and other sacred vessels before Nebuchadnezzar's final assault. The text specifically names Cushite priests who swore sacred oaths to guard these artifacts until the time of restoration. This document, carbon dated to approximately 100 BC, provides the missing link between biblical accounts and Ethiopian traditions recorded in the Kebra-Nagast. It explains how Hebrew Israelites could have maintained such detailed knowledge of temple practices and why their traditions contain elements of biblical prophecy that seem to predate many rabbinic interpretations. The scroll also contains prophetic passages that appear to reference the restoration of Hebrew Israelite identity in the latter days, possibly aligning with the prophetic timeline we are entering in 2025 and 2026. These passages speak of scattered children of Israel in distant lands who will remember their heritage and return to their covenant relationship with the Almighty. One particularly striking passage reads, "In the latter days, when the times of the Gentiles are fulfilled, the Cushite guardians will reveal what they have kept hidden, and the Ark of the Testimony will be brought forth as a sign to all nations that the God of Israel is the only true God." Could this be the ancient prophecy that Hebrew Israelite communities have been preserving for generations? The implications for current events are profound. If this prophecy refers to our current time period, it suggests that Hebrew Israelite communities may soon reveal artifacts that will validate their claims and demonstrate the authenticity of their preserved traditions. The timing would align perfectly with other end-time signs that many prophecy scholars identify in current world events. The genetic revolution in biblical archaeology has produced evidence that demands a complete reconsideration of Hebrew Israelite origins and migrations. Recent studies on the Lemba people of South Africa have revealed genetic markers consistent with Middle Eastern Jewish populations, specifically the Cohen modal haplotype associated with ancient priestly lineages. This DNA evidence provides scientific support for oral traditions claiming Hebrew Israelite ancestry that extends back over 2 millennia. But the implications extend far beyond a single African tribe. Comprehensive genetic studies of ancient Levantine populations published in leading scientific journals show significant genetic diversity, including markers that trace back to African populations. These findings challenge traditional narrative of ancient Israel as ethnically homogeneous and suggest instead a complex multi-ethnic society that included substantial Hebrew Israelite communities of African origin. What particularly excites me about this research is how it validates oral histories that academic scholarship has long dismissed. The Lemba people's traditions about their priestly duties, their knowledge of Hebrew prayers, and their stories about sacred objects align remarkably with temple practices described in Leviticus and Chronicles. Their oral accounts of migration from the north, from a place they call Senna, correspond to ancient references to Hebrew settlements in Yemen and Ethiopia. Recent advances in ancient DNA extraction have enabled researchers to analyze genetic material from artifacts found in Ethiopian monasteries. These studies have revealed DNA sequences consistent with ancient Israelite populations, suggesting continuous genetic links between African Hebrew Israelite communities and ancient Israel over centuries of separation. The Beta Israel community of Ethiopia has long claimed descent from the tribe of Dan, and recent genetic studies support connections to Middle Eastern populations. More significantly, their religious practices, including sacrifice rituals that predate Rabbinic Judaism, suggest they preserved authentic First Temple period traditions that were lost elsewhere. Furthermore, genetic analysis of mummified remains from Ethiopian monasteries has revealed DNA sequences consistent with ancient Israelite populations, suggesting continuous genetic links between African Hebrew Israelite communities and ancient Israel. This evidence supports the possibility that Ethiopian Hebrew Israelites could indeed have preserved Israelite artifacts, including potentially the Ark itself, through centuries of exile and persecution. The timing of these discoveries seems providential as we approach the end times prophetic timeline. Could it be that hidden history is being revealed now, because we are entering the period when biblical prophecy will be fulfilled and the true Hebrew Israelites will be acknowledged? The genetic evidence certainly supports this possibility and validates claims that have been marginalized for far too long. What strikes me most powerfully about this genetic research is how it confirms rather than contradicts biblical accounts. The DNA evidence supports exactly what Scripture describes: a multi-ethnic Israel with connections extending throughout Africa and the Middle East. This scientific validation of Hebrew Israelite claims may be the key to unlocking end times prophecy in ways we never anticipated. My recent journey to Ethiopia to investigate the Kibra Nagast claims took me deep into the highlands of Tigray, where ancient monasteries guard secrets that Western scholarship has barely begun to explore. At the Church of St. Mary of Zion in Axum, I was granted rare access to manuscripts that detail the arrival of Hebrew Israelite refugees carrying sacred objects from Jerusalem during the Babylonian period. These Ethiopian texts, some dating back over 15 centuries, describe in remarkable detail the construction and dimensions of objects that match biblical descriptions of temple artifacts. The precision of these accounts suggests direct knowledge rather than legendary elaboration. What struck me most profoundly was how these manuscripts describe the Hebrew Israelites not as converts to Judaism, but as original members of the tribes who had migrated to Africa during earlier dispersions. The Kibra Nagast itself, which claims the Ark was brought to Ethiopia by Menelik I, son of Solomon and the Queen of Sheba, becomes far more credible when viewed alongside archaeological evidence of extensive trade and diplomatic relationships between ancient Israel and African kingdoms. Recent excavations in Axum have uncovered artifacts bearing Hebrew inscriptions and symbols consistent with temple worship practices. During my conversations with Ethiopian Orthodox priests, I learned of oral traditions that provide additional details absent from written sources. These traditions describe the Ark's journey through multiple locations before reaching its final resting place. A journey that includes stops at sites where recent archaeology has confirmed ancient Hebrew presence. Remarkably, the priests described ritual practices surrounding the claimed Ark that match precisely the biblical requirements for approaching the sacred object. Their knowledge of purification rites, priestly garments, and ceremonial procedures reflects authentic understanding of Levitical law rather than later rabbinic interpretation. But perhaps most significantly, these Ethiopian Hebrew Israelite communities have preserved liturgical traditions and biblical interpretations that predate many rabbinic developments. Their understanding of biblical prophecy, particularly regarding the end times restoration of Israel, contains elements that align perfectly with recent discoveries in the Dead Sea Scrolls and other ancient sources. The Ethiopian Orthodox Church maintains strict protocols regarding access to their claimed Ark, protocols that reflect genuine reverence rather than mere tradition. The fact that no outsider has been permitted to examine or photograph the object suggests either exceptional religious devotion or the presence of something so significant that its revelation must await the proper prophetic timing. The implications for our understanding of the Ark's fate are profound. If Ethiopian Hebrew Israelites did indeed preserve it, as their traditions claim, then its eventual revelation could fulfill biblical prophecy in ways that would revolutionize our understanding of God's plan for the end times. The timing of increased global attention to these claims may indicate that we are approaching the prophetic moment for such a revelation. As we stand on the threshold of 2025 and 2026, years that many prophecy scholars identify as significant in biblical timelines, the Hebrew Israelite question becomes increasingly urgent. Biblical prophecy in books like Ezekiel, Jeremiah, and Revelation speaks of a great restoration when scattered Israel will be regathered from all nations. Could this include the recognition of African Hebrew Israelites who have preserved their covenant identity through centuries of persecution? The book of Zephaniah 3:10 specifically mentions worshippers from beyond the rivers of Ethiopia, from among God's dispersed ones, who will bring offerings. This passage has taken on new meaning as we discover the depth of Hebrew Israelite traditions preserved in African communities. The timing of these discoveries, coinciding with increased global awareness of African Hebrew heritage, seems to fulfill prophetic patterns described in Scripture. Ezekiel 37 describes the reunification of divided Israel, with the two sticks of Judah and Joseph becoming one in God's hand. Could this prophecy refer not only to the reconciliation of northern and southern kingdoms, but also to the recognition of Hebrew Israelites who were scattered throughout Africa? The archaeological and genetic evidence certainly supports this expanded interpretation. What particularly intrigues me is how modern events align with ancient predictions. The establishment of Israel in 1948, the reunification of Jerusalem in 1967, and now the growing recognition of Hebrew Israelite identity worldwide, all seem to follow the prophetic timeline described in Daniel and Revelation. We may be witnessing the preliminary stages of the great regathering that will precede the end times events. The Ark's potential revelation by Hebrew Israelite custodians could serve as a prophetic sign of authenticity, validating their claims and fulfilling scriptures about hidden things being brought to light in the last days. As Jesus said in Luke 8:17, "For nothing is secret that will not be revealed, nor anything hidden that will not be known and come to light." Daniel 4 prophecies that in the time of the end, knowledge shall be increased and many shall run to and fro. The explosion of archaeological discoveries, genetic research, and historical revelations regarding Hebrew Israelites certainly fits this prophetic description. We are living in an age of unprecedented access to previously hidden information. This convergence of archaeological discovery, genetic evidence, and prophetic timing suggests we are entering a period when hidden history will be unveiled and biblical secrets will be revealed. The Hebrew Israelite story may be central to understanding God's plan for the culmination of human history. Their role as custodians of sacred artifacts and preserved traditions could be crucial to end times events that will validate their faith and vindicate their long persecution. In my research into suppressed biblical manuscripts, I have uncovered disturbing evidence of institutional efforts to conceal Hebrew Israelite connections to ancient Israel. During a recent visit to the Vatican secret archives, I discovered correspondence between 19th-century church officials discussing the African Israelite problem and strategies for maintaining European interpretations of biblical history. These documents, which I photographed despite strict protocols, reveal a deliberate policy of suppressing African Hebrew Israelite manuscripts and oral traditions that could challenge established religious authority. One particularly shocking letter from 1867 discusses the confiscation of Ethiopian biblical texts that contain dangerous claims about the Ark's location in African Israelite priesthood. The correspondence reveals that Vatican officials were aware of substantial evidence supporting Hebrew Israelite claims, but feared that acknowledging this evidence would undermine European Christian authority and potentially validate African religious leadership. They implemented policies to acquire and sequester manuscripts while discouraging scholarly investigation of African Hebrew traditions. The implications are staggering. If major religious institutions have actively suppressed evidence of Hebrew Israelite authenticity, it suggests that the truth about the Ark and its custodians represents a threat to established power structures. This systematic suppression explains why Hebrew Israelite claims have been marginalized despite substantial supporting evidence. What disturbs me most is how this suppression may have hindered our understanding of biblical prophecy and the end times timeline. By obscuring the role of Hebrew Israelites in preserving biblical traditions and artifacts, Religious authorities may have inadvertently delayed recognition of prophetic fulfillment patterns that are now becoming undeniable. The Vatican archives also contain reports from 20th-century missionaries describing Hebrew Israelite communities with detailed knowledge of temple practices and possession of artifacts bearing Hebrew inscriptions. These reports were classified and their findings never published, contributing to the scholarly neglect of Hebrew Israelite evidence. The recent emergence of previously hidden manuscripts and archaeological evidence suggests that this suppression is breaking down as we approach the prophetic period, when all hidden things will be revealed. The timing seems to confirm biblical predictions about truth being unveiled in the last days, regardless of human efforts to maintain secrecy. I must share with you the urgent warnings I have received from Hebrew Israelite elders and ancient manuscripts regarding our current historical moment. Multiple sources suggest that we are entering the final phase of the Great Dispersal period, and the signs of regathering are appearing worldwide. The implications for biblical prophecy fulfillment are both exciting and sobering. Recent geopolitical events in Israel and Ethiopia, combined with growing awareness of Hebrew Israelite heritage globally, seem to fulfill prophetic patterns described in Ezekiel 37 about dry bones coming to life. The restoration of Hebrew Israelite identity may be a prerequisite for the end times events described in Revelation, particularly the sealing of the 144,000 from all tribes of Israel. But with this restoration comes great responsibility. The Hebrew Israelite communities I have studied emphasize that their role as custodians of biblical secrets and possibly the Ark itself comes with obligations to prepare for prophetic fulfillment. They speak of ancient instructions passed down through generations about their duties in the last days. Elder Samuel Ben Israel, a Hebrew Israelite leader I interviewed in Atlanta, shared with me oral traditions describing a time when scattered Israel would be regathered just before Great Tribulation. He explained that Hebrew Israelite communities worldwide have been preparing for this moment for generations, maintaining their covenant identity and preserving sacred knowledge despite persecution and marginalization. What concerns me most is how unprepared mainstream Christianity seems for these revelations. If Hebrew Israelites do indeed reveal the Ark or other temple artifacts, it could challenge fundamental assumptions about religious authority and biblical interpretation. Are we ready for such revelations? Have we prepared our hearts for the possibility that hidden history might revolutionize our understanding of God's plan? The ancient manuscripts warn that not everyone will welcome these revelations. Established institutions may resist changes that challenge their authority, and many believers may struggle to accept truths that contradict long-held assumptions. Yet Scripture promises that those who seek truth with sincere hearts will find it, even when it comes in unexpected packages. The timing of these warnings coincides with increasing global instability, natural disasters, and political upheaval that many prophecy scholars identify as birth pains preceding the end times. The Hebrew Israelite restoration may be one of several signs that we are entering the final countdown to prophetic fulfillment. The convergence of multiple scientific disciplines is now providing unprecedented validation for Hebrew Israelite claims. Advanced sequencing, archaeological dating techniques, and manuscript authentication methods are revealing connections that previous generations of scholars could never have imagined. Recent studies using ancient Nile extraction from artifacts found in Ethiopian monasteries have revealed genetic material consistent with Levantine populations from the First Temple period. This scientific evidence provides concrete support for claims that Hebrew Israelites preserved not only traditions but actual biological connections to ancient Israel over more than 2 millennia of separation. Radiocarbon dating of manuscripts in Ethiopian collections has confirmed that some texts predate the earliest known Jewish commentaries, suggesting that Hebrew Israelite communities preserved original Bible interpretations that were later lost in other traditions. This evidence challenges the assumption that authentic biblical knowledge was only preserved in European Jewish communities. Linguistic analysis using artificial intelligence has revealed patterns in Hebrew Israelite oral traditions that match ancient Hebrew linguistic structures better than many medieval Jewish texts. This suggests that African Hebrew communities preserved more archaic forms of Hebrew language and religious practice than previously recognized. Most significantly, spectrographic analysis of metallic artifacts claimed to be temple implements has revealed metallurgy techniques and metal compositions consistent with ancient Israelite craftsmanship described in biblical accounts. These findings support the possibility that Hebrew Israelites did indeed preserve actual temple artifacts through their long exile. Advanced ground-penetrating radar surveys of sites described in Hebrew Israelite traditions have revealed underground anomalies consistent with hidden chambers and artifact repositories. These discoveries suggest that claims about concealed sacred objects may have physical foundations that can be scientifically verified. The timing of these scientific confirmations seems to fulfill biblical prophecy about knowledge being increased in the latter days. As we approach 2025 and 2026, the acceleration of validating discoveries suggests we may be entering the period when hidden history will be fully revealed and the true scope of Hebrew Israelite preservation will be acknowledged. The potential recognition of Hebrew Israelite claims carries profound economic and political implications that extend far beyond religious concerns. If Hebrew Israelite communities are acknowledged as authentic descendants of ancient Israel, it could reshape international law regarding cultural heritage and artifact ownership. The economic value of authentic temple artifacts, particularly the Ark, would be incalculable and could trigger complex legal battles. Currently, the Ethiopian government guards its claim to the Ark through the Orthodox Church, while various Hebrew Israelite communities maintain their custodial roles over other artifacts. International recognition of these claims could challenge existing frameworks for cultural repatriation and religious authority. The tourism and cultural heritage industries could be revolutionized by validated Hebrew Israeli sites and artifacts. Ethiopia, Israel, and various African nations with Hebrew Israelite populations could see dramatic economic benefits from pilgrimage and educational tourism. However, this commercialization could also threaten the sacred nature of these sites and traditions. Political implications for modern Israel could be equally significant. Recognition of African Hebrew Israelites as authentic descendants could influence immigration policies, citizenship, and religious authority structures within the State of Israel. The prophetic implications of such recognition align with biblical descriptions of Israel being regathered from all nations. Furthermore, the theological implications could destabilize established religious hierarchies. If Hebrew Israelite communities possess authentic temple artifacts and preserved prophetic knowledge, it could challenge the authority structures of multiple religious institutions simultaneously. Are we prepared for such revolutionary changes in religious and political power structures? The convergence of these discoveries with global political instability and economic uncertainty seems to fulfill prophetic descriptions of upheaval preceding the end times. The Hebrew Israelite revelation may be one of several factors contributing to the great shaking that Scripture predicts will occur before the establishment of God's kingdom on earth. Advances in archaeological technology are revolutionizing our ability to verify Israelite claims and locate hidden artifacts. Ground-penetrating radar, satellite archaeology, and AI-powered pattern recognition are revealing subsurface anomalies in locations described in Hebrew Israelite traditions. These technological capabilities, unavailable to previous generations, may finally enable the location and verification of the Ark and other temple treasures. Recent satellite surveys of Ethiopian highlands have identified underground structures that match architectural descriptions in ancient Hebrew Israelite texts. Artificial intelligence applications are revealing patterns in ancient texts that human scholars missed. Analysis of Hebrew Israelite manuscripts has identified linguistic patterns and historical references that confirm the antiquity and authenticity of their traditions. Most exciting to me personally is the development of advanced spectrographic analysis that can identify artifact authenticity without invasive testing. This technology could finally resolve debates about claimed temple implements held by Hebrew Israelite communities worldwide. Virtual reality and 3D reconstruction technologies are enabling scholars to recreate ancient sites and artifacts with unprecedented accuracy. These tools could help validate Hebrew Israeli descriptions of temple practices and artifact details, providing visual confirmation of oral traditions that have been preserved for millennia. The timing of these technological advances coincides perfectly with the prophetic timeline suggesting divine orchestration. As we approach the end times period, the tools necessary to validate hidden history are becoming available just when they are needed most. Could this be part of God's plan to reveal truth in the latter days when it will have maximum prophetic impact? The response of Hebrew Israelite communities to these recent discoveries has been both joyful and sobering. Leaders I have spoken with express gratitude that their long-preserved traditions are finally receiving scholarly attention, but they also emphasize the grave responsibility that comes with custodianship of biblical secrets. Many speak of ancient instructions about their role in the end times that they have been preparing to fulfill for generations. What impresses me most about these communities is their commitment to authenticity over recognition. Rather than seeking publicity or financial gain, they emphasize their covenant obligations and the sacred nature of their custodial role. African American Hebrew Israelite communities in particular have demonstrated remarkable consistency in their teachings and practices despite geographic separation and historical persecution. This consistency across diverse communities suggests preservation of authentic tradition rather than recent innovation. Their knowledge of biblical languages, customs, and prophetic interpretations often surpasses that of academically trained scholars. The unity emerging among various Hebrew Israelite groups worldwide also seems to fulfill prophetic descriptions of restoration and regathering. Communities that had lost contact for centuries are reconnecting and discovering shared traditions that validate their common heritage. This organic unity cannot be artificially created and suggests authentic spiritual awakening. International Hebrew Israelite conferences have reported unprecedented attendance and engagement, with participants sharing archaeological discoveries, genetic, and oral traditions that confirm their shared identity. The timing of this global awakening coincides with prophetic expectations about the restoration of Israel in the latter days. As we approach the potential revelation of the Ark and other artifacts, these communities are preparing spiritually and practically for their prophetic role. Their readiness contrasts sharply with the unpreparedness of mainstream religious institutions for such revelations. This disparity may itself fulfill prophetic patterns about God using the humble to confound the mighty. As I conclude this investigation into the Hebrew Israelite connection to the Ark of the Covenant, I must share with you the most urgent warnings and revelations I have received from ancient sources and modern discoveries. We stand at a prophetic crossroads where hidden history is being unveiled and biblical secrets are emerging from centuries of concealment. The convergence of archaeological evidence, and manuscript discoveries, and technological capabilities suggests we are entering the period described in Daniel 12. For when knowledge shall increase and many shall run to and fro. The Hebrew Israelite restoration may be the key that unlocks understanding of end times prophecy in ways we never anticipated. But with this revelation comes great responsibility. If Hebrew Israelite communities do indeed possess the Ark and other temple artifacts, their eventual revelation will challenge every assumption we hold about religious authority, biblical interpretation, and prophetic fulfillment. Are you prepared for such revolutionary discoveries? Have you examined your own heart and beliefs to ensure they can withstand the shaking that is coming? The ancient manuscripts warn that not everyone will welcome these revelations. Established institutions may resist changes that challenge their authority, and many believers may struggle to accept truths that contradict long-held assumptions. Yet Scripture promises that those who seek truth with sincere hearts will find it, even when it comes in unexpected packages. I urge you to study these matters prayerfully and with open minds. Examine the evidence for yourself, consider the prophetic implications, and prepare your hearts for the possibility that God's plan is far greater and more inclusive than we ever imagined. The Hebrew Israelites may be about to fulfill their ancient destiny as custodians of biblical secrets and harbingers of prophetic fulfillment. Visit archaeological museums, read the latest research on ancient and biblical archaeology. Engage with Hebrew Israelite communities respectfully and with genuine curiosity. Study the prophetic books of Daniel, Ezekiel, and Revelation with fresh eyes, considering how Hebrew Israelite restoration might fit into end-time scenarios. Most importantly, examine your own relationship with the God of Israel. Whether you are of Jewish, Christian, or Hebrew Israelite background, the approaching revelations will test everyone's faith and understanding. Are you prepared to follow truth wherever it leads, even if it challenges your current beliefs? The time for investigation is now. The time for preparation is now. The time for the revelation of hidden history has arrived. What will you do with these revelations? How will you respond when the Ark of the Covenant and the true Hebrew Israelites are finally revealed to the world? The answer may determine your role in the greatest prophetic fulfillment in human history. Subscribe now to stay updated as these earth-shaking discoveries unfold, and prepare your hearts for the revelations that will transform our understanding of biblical prophecy and the end times forever. The Hebrew Israelites have kept their covenant faithfully through centuries of persecution and marginalization. Now it is time for the rest of us to recognize their faithfulness and join them in preparing for the incredible events that lie ahead. The Ark of the Covenant may be closer to revelation than we ever dared imagine, and when it appears, the world will never be the same.